219-845-1100. Let's go to Bob on line 1. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, good morning. I had a legal question for Alexis. But first, they were talking about gas prices. The gas that you're buying in Texas is not the same gas as you're buying in Chicago. I forget where I was reading it, Wall Street Journal, Investors Business Daily. It was a reputable newspaper. They were talking about how there are actually 18 different blends of gas in the United States, depending on where you live, based on smog, based on elevation. So some quantities of gas are more expensive to produce than others.
And so what, they're using a cheaper gas in Texas?
Some places they can't. They don't need to
Is it I'm sorry, is
ahead.
it because we have stricter regulations on pollution up here?
Yes, I guess because they call it the greater Chicagoland area, Milwaukee, Chicago, Northwest Indiana has to have a certain summer blend. If you live in a high altitude area, you get a different blend in the summer, the spring, and the winter. It's insane.
So you have your winter ale and your summer.
Yeah. Yes, the EPA has given us 18 different blends of gas, and as these refineries change over to go to the newer blends, other gas prices go up. There's diminished capacity for brand A because they have to do blend B, and then they make only so much of blend B, so they have to charge more for it. It's outrageous. I mean, it doesn't help. So just put it that way. I figured you could make one blend really good and just make it year round. Do you think that would kind of cut down on the cost? But I don't work for the government, so.
So what's the legal question?
How do they get away? How do people get away? And not specifically with this case, but there was a guy from Munster with a DUI, alleged DUI, killed a guy in Lansing. It came out in the paper that the guy had 2 previous DUIs that were pled down. How? And they were agreed to by judges. Who the judges were, I don't know, and I don't really care. But at what point do judges not have the capacity to plead down DUIs? At what point does you get pulled over, you blow a .12, you blew a .12, your butt's going to jail.
So
I don't
at what
understand
point do judges not have the capacity? What did you just ask?
Yeah, do they not have the capacity or
Well,
the ability to accept the plea?
When there's a plea agreement, one of the first things that, other than, inform you of the rights that you're giving up by pleading to a charge, the judge will tell you that they are not a party to the plea, that they don't have to accept the plea. And there are times when they do not accept the pleas, believe me. I'm not going to sit here and judge a judge. I'm just going to say that, the policies have been what the policies have been, I guess, and there are, this Tamoris person, I forget his first name, but that's who you're referring to. He is by far he's not the norm. He's the, somebody that stands out as like, well, how did this happen? And it's true. And those kind of things shouldn't happen. And if somebody is repeatedly breaking laws as far as driving and everything else, then it's not like we don't have it. This is a computer age. Everybody knows you can print out somebody's record, you can print out their driving record, you could print out their criminal history, you could do all of that. So I can't speak to what or why, how this happened.
One question, though, very quickly. Is there any way, I understand there's separation, executive, legislative, judicial, so they don't step on each other's toes. But is there anything legislatively that can be done that could kind of tie the hands, I don't say tie the hands of judges, but actually have to make judges have to actually enforce the laws? Like once you get over 100 moving violations, something has to happen. And I'm trying not to be sarcastic with being sarcastic. But, at some point, why do we even really have the judges if everything can be pled down? Is there anything legislatively that can be done that can say, you know what, after one DUI, after your second DUI, there is no more, or after your first DUI, there's no pleading down?
All right, Bobby. All right, I got the idea. Okay. We're talking.
What he's asking about is normally what the prosecutor's office does as far as policy goes. So if he's looking for, if you've had one DUI, and if that one's pled down, then you shouldn't have the option to plead down, moving forward. That's usually the way one would expect it to happen, because you would think that, sometimes things happen and people, might have one discretion and hopefully nobody gets hurt and there's no accident. Because sometimes you have somebody who, let's say, is 25 years old and they've never had any traffic infractions, they've never had any problems, and now they've had a DUI and they've been arrested, and now it's going to be a lot tougher for that person to get any kind of relief other than pleading to an OWI because of what's happened with, let's say, the Tamoris case or anything moving forward. So there has to be there has to be some kind of discretion to be able to look at an individual and say, okay, this person, he's obviously had a great driving record for 10, 20 years. It's their first offense. Maybe he didn't, his breathalyzer, he didn't blow that high or whatever, but, it's getting to the point where it's going to be an all or nothing. And I think as far as legislation goes, legislation is, well, hello, if you're over a .08, then you're driving drunk. If you, if you have a refusal, you refuse to submit to a breathalyzer, there's also legislation for that. I mean, there's enough legislation regarding these things. It's just that obviously you have to look at each case individually, and, some of these drivers.
But the Tamoris case has brought it.
I don't even know how that happened.
I mean, that has brought it to the forefront, and, a lot of people are talking about it, and I'm sure it's having its effects on the legal system. And if you guys don't know what he's talking about, is he was out allegedly partying in downtown Hammond, and came up to Holman and Ridge
Road,
and allegedly killed a Lansing man. And now it comes out that he had like 100 violations, and that 100 number is really just kind of flashing on a lot of people. Like, how did that happen? And
well, I don't even know how he still had his license, if you think of it in those terms, because there's statutes talking about how if there's you become a habitual traffic offender at some point, and one way to do that is if you have a combination of 3 misdemeanors convictions on your driver's license, then within 10 years, then you lose your license for 10 years. But even a combination of a misdemeanor, even if it was reduced to a reckless driver, and that's still a misdemeanor. And then all of these moving violations, how did he still have his license? Ask the Bureau of Motor Vehicles that.
Speaking of moving, let's talk to Dan on line 1. Hey, Dan.
Hey, how are you doing today?
What's
Good
happening?
Morning. Good morning, Alexis.
Morning.
Good morning, Jim. I kind of want to change the topic a little bit. I heard a caller earlier who was discussing the Florida case with the 17-year-old gentleman who, happened to have gotten killed. What we don't cover and what doesn't get covered a lot in the press is the fact that over the weekend, last weekend, 49 people were shot in Chicago. We don't even get a bleep in the airwaves. We don't get no press. We don't get nothing.
All right, good
How do you
point.
feel about that?
Well, good point. I mean, obviously, McCarthy, the chief of police of Chicago, has basically declared a war. And if you watched some of the press conferences, he came on. He said, "Hey, listen, there's a war going on, and we will find you, and we will." He talked very tough. And I've never really heard a cop basically say, "Come on, let's go at it." And after all these shootings in Chicago over the weekend, but
Including a police officer.
including a police officer. So I mean, the whole thing is, I don't know what he's talking about. I think it's gotten a lot of coverage here locally.
Right.
Is it getting coverage nationally? It's hard to tell.